Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to JoshuaGaiman.com. I am your host, Joshua Gaiman. Today is Saturday, September 17th, 2011. Go Ducks. I got my Ducks shirt on. And I wanted to talk about something that actually happened last week. President Obama last Thursday night addressed the United States, and he proposed the American Jobs Bill. And I wanted to touch on that and give my viewers my 2 cents on what's going on and what was said. I think the American Jobs Bill, a couple things that came to mind right away. Number one, the name of the bill is the American Jobs Bill. So it's almost like if you speak out, say anything negative about it, you're anti-American or unpatriotic or something like that. I think that's kind of silly. The second thing is a lot of people were expecting a $300 billion bill, and came out it was actually closer to $450 billion in cost to implement this Jobs Act. Couple big things. Anytime you're talking about the government creating jobs, it's going to create a lot of controversy. Obviously, that's a big difference between the right and the left wings. Government creating jobs versus the private sector. And as always, I'm not Republican or Democratic. I'm just American. So I wanted to offer my neutral points here about this jobs bill and about stuff that's going on. And I, as a person, would much rather profit on the success of our nation rather than failure. So I never mean to be doom and gloom. But it's important that we understand what's really going on. Okay, we've borrowed ourselves into a ditch, and digging deeper out of this ditch of deficit spending and excessive debt is digging deeper is not going to get us out of the ditch. It's the equivalent of pouring gasoline on a fire. My brother's a firefighter in Oregon, and I think if I asked him how to put out a fire, he would not say to pour more fuel into the fire. So, we got to quit doing that. And that's an analogy Peter Schiff used when he spoke to Congress about this stuff. The laws of money, not dollars, but actually money, will prohibit from allowing government stimulus to create jobs that are real. Stimulus prevents the free market from taking its course back as the business cycle shifts and unravels the problems that excessive debt and bad spending have created. The economy is lacking 3 things right now: savings, investment, and production. Those are the real things that promote the economy, and we're lacking them big time. Problem is right now that savers are losers, because as you save dollars that are devalued by the expansion of the debt system, which is ran by the Federal Reserve and central banks, you become a loser if you save your money or hold it. Okay, it's a free market global economy that we're in. So government regulation has taxed employers into sending their necessary jobs overseas. That's the problem I feel that is often overlooked. Countries that incentivize jobs and have people to do them will get them from the entrepreneurs around the world who find and create the real need for jobs. And profit is the only reason any company is in business, and profit per employee is arrived at by taking the revenue generated by that employee and subtracting the cost of that employee. And there's more than you have to look at than just the wages of hiring someone. You have to look at the taxes that you're going to have to pay after hiring them. You're going to have to look at the benefits that you're going to have to pay after hiring them. And you're going to have to look at the liability that you're incurring by hiring them. Hiring is a huge risk for employers. Okay, it has a huge potential benefit because it allows for leverage, and so it can help employers be more profitable and leveraged, but it's a huge risk. A bad employee costs a lot of money. An employee that goes south for legal reasons, liabilities, goes south, and if they can't be profitable for you, then obviously that's a big risk for an employee because they're just losing money. Employers need capital to provide what businesses need and what employees need. Okay, capital has to come from somewhere, so it comes from savings or borrowing. And we can't borrow anymore because the world is not buying our debt like they once did. And the reason why is because our report card is failing miserable. Capital and jobs are rapidly going overseas. Government spending will not increase the demand for jobs. Look right now, our government is spending more and more, and people are clinging tight to what little money they do have. When credit was available, we had a much greater demand for things. Now we are forced to determine, as consumers, what we really need and what we just really want. And the things that we do need, how bad do we really need them? demand comes from supply. You can't have demand for something that doesn't exist. Millions of American workers need jobs right now. How do you increase the demand for jobs? The way that you increase the demand for jobs is you bring down the cost of labor so that we can produce more. Employees are spending so much money on legal and compliance where there is no added protection to the consumers anyways, that is putting a lot of people, is creating a lot of unemployment because the employers can't afford to hire them. And if we're not careful, legal and compliance debts can create a vacuum and suck production from our country's GDP. The largest of all corporations, the giants, the banks, these are the businesses who control the system with their money. Turn the responsibility back to the people and to the streets. We are smart enough to handle the risk at the benefit of the increased demand for jobs so that we can make money and provide an American life for our families. The problem with allowing the government to set a demand for jobs is that the cost of employment is still there. It's a great idea in theory until you factor in that the workers' wages still have to come from somewhere, and while the government writes the checks out of a checkbook that is actually negative, the real expense is passed on to anyone who holds their money in dollars or savings. This is the biggest tax of all, and it is what is referred to as inflation. Deficit spending causes inflation, and therefore deficit spending is harder on the American people than raising their income tax. Let me say that again. The real expense of deficit spending is passed on to anyone who holds their money in dollars or savings. It is the biggest tax of all, and it is what is referred to as inflation. Deficit spending causes inflation, and therefore deficit spending hurts us American middle-class citizens more than if our income tax was to be raised. Okay? Infrastructure spending. Sounds good. A couple weeks ago, I brought up, Obama had brought it up in one of his speeches as he was doing his campaigning in the Midwest, and I said, it does make sense. We got all these people sitting around, let's build bridges, let's build parks, let's do something. But here's the thing, that when we look a little more in depth, some of the stuff that we discover, infrastructure spending sounds great. Problem is it doesn't stimulate the economy. Infrastructure spending doesn't stimulate the economy because it drains the economy of its resources. It only helps in the long run if, number one, you finish the project, and number two, if the project, when complete, raises the productivity of the nation. China's building massive airports right now and new infrastructure because they're getting rich from all the production that they've produced over the last, couple decades. We're broke. We haven't been producing much of anything, sadly. The other sad problem with leaving job creation to the government is that it is really easy to see the jobs they create. But what you don't see are the jobs they destroy to create these jobs. All that is actually happening when the government creates jobs is that they are rearranging resources. It doesn't create any wealth for our nation. And the jobs and wealth that gets replaced, and the jobs and wealth that are destroyed are more valuable than whatever the government replaces them with. As a result, the country is poorer. This is very counterproductive. I hear people say we need to tax corporations the most. Problem I have with that is the majority of corporations are small businesses. A corporation is just an entity. If the government needs revenue, they should tax at consumption when the money is spent. When someone spends their wealth, tax them then if you're going to tax them, not at production where they accumulate their wealth. The argument is obviously, well, if we only tax at spending, well, the rich don't spend all their money. Well, precisely. The money they don't spend is what grows the economy and produces jobs. Tax the rich when they spend it, not when they invest it into the economy. Congress is not being straight with us. They are simply underestimating the time we have left before we are forced by the global free market to deal with our sovereign debt crisis and our currency crisis. A lot of people might be saying, well, what are you talking about? I see the currency crisis coming extremely soon, maybe even before our 2012 elections. If you watch my videos, you hear me talk all the time about how the government and Federal Reserve are crucifying our dollar, and all you have to look at to prove this, my point, is the price of gold and how it has been rising. I hear people say, well, deficit spending. It's deficit spending, but let's borrow now while interest rates are at historical lows and pay it back in the future after we've invested it into our economy and seen the growth. Again, it's something that sounds good. The problem with it is we have to look at free market economics.